The Chicago Bulls could potentially have a top 5 draft pick this year, depending on how they finish out the remaining 27 games on the season. On today's episode, we're going to talk about AK's strategy or lack thereof, the Chicago Bulls buying into directionlessness, and also rewarding mediocrity. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And last night, I dropped an emergency episode via a Joe Cowley article in regards to the AK, Mark Eversley, and Billy Donovan being safe heading into next season, meaning that there will be no change at all with the Chicago Bulls heading into next season. Now, for many Bulls fans, there's no surprise, right? And I've been saying for a while myself, like AK and Eversley are definitely going to be staying in their jobs for a while, right? Billy Donovan has 1 year left on his contract. It was always most likely that he's going to see out the end of that contract. I want to be clear there, right? But the thing that I think is the most disheartening about it is the fact that it's like, that once again, this team and being in the place that it's in, it's just we reward directionlessness. And I get people are saying, well, we've chosen a direction. We're going to be bad for a while. Yes, we have chosen a direction as far as being bad for a while, right? But I've said before, that's the only first step in this, right? Even in being bad and increasing your chances to get a better pick, right? To have a higher pick, that's really what that is. It increases your chance to have a higher pick. Go and look around the NBA and look at how many, even number one overall, how many top 5 picks never really amount to very much. They may be very talented players. They may even be star level players, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your team is going to really kind of forge anything. Look at Joel Embiid, for example. Look at the Philadelphia 76ers are the perfect example of why tanking does not work, right? Rebuild works, especially when you already have your anchor to rebuild around, right? And sometimes that happens over time. Sometimes that happens immediately. It's a lot of different things that go into that, right? And the Chicago Bulls sit in a place that since trading Zach LaVine, right, we've been winless in the 4 games since we've traded him, and we lose the games on an average of 24.5. Now, that means that the Chicago Bulls do have an increased chance to get a top 5 pick. I know right now we have the 8th worst record in the league, right? But then when you look at it, we have regained control over our own pick, which is something. The Bulls no longer have to walk that tightrope that they had to walk to make sure. Like, for example, we would have had to be in the top 10 to keep our pick this year, top 8 to keep it the next 2 years, right? And so, for people that, like, it's one idiot is like, we need an epic tank. And it's like, no, now that we own our pick, we don't need an epic tank. And then you're not going to get an epic tank. It's not going to happen, right? But outside of that, right, when you look at it, is that now that you remove having to walk that tightrope to keep your pick, it's made it a lot easier for you. But it at the same time, it's also made or given AK more of a reason to not really buy into the direction. Meaning, like, even AK, and I know I said, listen, don't worry about the words, right? Of him saying we're gonna compete for a playing spot. The Chicago Bulls are a bad team, right? And when you look at it right now, the teams behind us in Philadelphia 76ers, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Toronto Raptors, right? Now, the Philadelphia 76ers can't get right. Listen, I've been talking about them for a while as like, oh, if they ever start hitting their stride, we're in trouble. They could pass us up. They're only 1.5 game back. I lose more and more faith that that's actually going to happen, right? They're 1.5 games behind us. They've lost 5 in a row. We lost 4 in a row. I don't know what happens there. It's like we're trying to outmaneuver each other as far as for that 10 seed. Like, we're both trying to avoid the 10 seed. But it seems like the Bulls are actually trying to dive into the 10 seed, right? The Brooklyn Nets, I'm not really too worried about the Nets, right? It is what it is. But then you get to the Toronto Raptors. And not to say that I want to make this all of a sudden a case to can we be bad enough to where one team starts passing us up? And the Toronto Raptors are 4-6. Now, they just traded for Brandon Ingram at the trade deadline. They gave him a contract extension. Are they going to be motivated to keep trying to play these games from now to the end of the season to where maybe, I know there's a large gap right now between us and the Toronto Raptors. They sit at 5 games behind us in the standings. And that's and when you go into the rest of the season, teams have under 30 games left right after the All-Star break. And you look at a 5-game spread, that's actually a pretty nice wide margin there, right? But it's not insurmountable. And that's what the Bulls are looking at. For example, like are the Toronto Raptors going to put something together enough and try to win enough to where now they don't have any inclination or reason to do so. They own their own first round pick outright, and they don't have any protections on it, so they have no reason to try to be bad either, to try to win. I mean, when you look at it, either they're going to get their pick regardless. And so that's something that you're also looking at with the Chicago Bulls is that, it is what it is. I'm not somebody who thinks that you can only have to be in the top 4 to find a star. I don't, especially in the next 2 drafts, right? So I'm not somebody who is in the race for the flag, so to say. I look heavily at all these prospects, and there's some really good prospects that can help the Chicago Bulls. It's not just about getting the number 1 or even the top 3 pick, no matter what the media will tell you, that can turn your team around. So that's what it comes down to. The Bulls right now are 23-33. We've lost 4 straight games in 7 of our last 10. So we're 8th worst in the league, meaning that, we have a really good chance to have a top 10 pick, right? We're kind of locked in to have that unless some lottery craziness happens. But the Bulls aren't side the realm of possibility either of landing in a top 5 pick. And I think that's something you need to look out for. But do not allow that to take away and to misguide us away from what's going on with A.K. Eversley and Billy Donovan, right? That trio, and if you want to add in the Reinsdorfs in that too, right, to those four entities, right, that are really guiding the Chicago Bulls and are the ones that are guiding our development of our players. They're guiding the direction of the roster, right? They're guiding our assets, and the owner guides it all as the owner of the team, right? And so when last night's report came out, and I decided to go live in regards to talk about it, one of the reasons why I wanted to do that was mainly because it shows, again, a franchise that really does not care. And I get it that there are going to be some Bulls fans that look at it and say, but Hayes, as long as Billy Donovan's our coach, that means we're going to have a great pick, right? Because we don't have the players that he needs to be able to go. He's only good when he has stars. Okay, I get that, right? But then what about the damage that it does to a player like Matas Buzelis? That's the perspective that I'm taking from. The Bulls are a bad team regardless. I don't think there's any coach that can come in here and all of a sudden make this team be like a top 6 seed in the Eastern Conference. There's definitely some coaches that can come in here and coach us better, have a better system that maybe can get more out of players, but we're still a bad and unbalanced roster, right? But I look at it in the sense of Matas, right? You got a guy like Matas Buzelis who now he's in the starting lineup, which is really good. Make no mistake about it. I love that Matas Buzelis is getting minutes. I love that he's averaging more minutes. But then you look at the game, for example, like the first game against Detroit, a game in which you talked about your players need to show you something. Matas was the only one playing with energy in that first game. It was Io as well in the second game against Detroit, but Matas was the only player playing with that type of energy. And you pulled him after he made a shot. You put him back in. You pulled him again, right? So I have my questions about, and if we get another top 10 pick, which it looks like this year, then you have 1 year of that new pick under Billy Donovan, 2 years of Matas Buzelis under Billy Donovan, and then that's if you even make a move then, because again, the Chicago Bulls front office, if they don't feel this roster is in a place to where it makes sense to bring in another new face, they could very well look at it and say, let's re-up Billy Donovan. And that's if we hear that Billy Donovan gets a contract extension, that's when I'm going to look AK in the face and say, you don't give a shit about these young players, regardless of winning or losing, right? The way that you get to eventually win is by buying in and developing your players. And if you don't care about that development of those young guys, you keep Billy Donovan on as a head coach. That's where that concern comes from, right? It's not just about Billy Donovan staying on or not because we're a bad team and how many wins we're going to get in the lottery odds or anything like that. You got to also look at if you, and I mean you as a fan, right? Whatever the front office says is what the front office says. If you as a fan look at Matas Buzelis and you think to yourself, yeah, this guy could potentially have it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean be a superstar player, but have it as far as we could have got one of them ones. We could have one that we can build around. We could have one that has the talent, that has the mindset. Ask yourself, do you really want Billy Donovan having that guy for potentially 2+ years? We already saw what a head coach. Jim Boylan was a completely different type of head case. I am no way saying that Billy Donovan is as bad of a coach as Jim Boylan is, because I don't believe that, right? but we've seen how much damage that not having the right head coach at the onset of a young player's development can do. For example, as much as people try to shit on Vinny Del Negro, which I still don't ever understand Bulls fans, because I feel like Bulls fans sometimes have a group think about something without actually looking at the stats. Vinny Del Negro never had a below 500 season. Ever had a below 500 season. Ever. Technically, Vinny Del Negro has a better win percentage as the Bulls head coach than what Billy Donovan has had. Technically, right? In his 2 years, coaching the Chicago Bulls, we had a 500 record each one of those 2 years, and we made the playoffs each one of those 2 years and lost in the first round. Now, I'm not saying that's great by any stretch of the imagination, but you know one thing Vinny Del Negro didn't do? He didn't get in the way of Derrick Rose's development. He didn't get in the way of Derrick Rose learning what it took to win and compete in playoff series and things like that. He wasn't a great coach that can get you over the hump by any stretch of the imagination, but he didn't get in the way of the development of Derrick Rose. When it started off that season and Ben Gordon was kind of stalling Derrick Rose out a little bit in the offense and taking shots, you know what we saw happen? That corrected itself as the season went on, and we relied more and more and more on Derrick Rose. Going into that second year, that's probably also one of the reasons Ben Gordon wasn't retained going into that second year. At that point, now that Derrick Rose showed what he could be, the bones of a rookie of the year season, all that, then he turned the keys completely over to. You know what else Vinny Del Negro did? Go and look at the groundwork that Vinny Del Negro laid out for Joakim Noah being a big part of the offense, of the creation of the offense, which took the ball out of the creation sometimes out of Derrick Rose's hands, but allowed him to come down off screens, be more creative. Vinny Del Negro said a lot of the things that people try to give credit to Mark Jackson to, which he did do at a very much higher level. I'm not saying that Vinny Del Negro did it as a high of level, but as far as teaching Steph and Clay a baseline of how to perform, Vinny Del Negro did that. And so ask yourself, if is Billy Donovan even as good at getting out the way of his stars' development, regardless if you want to look at Vinny Del Negro having a big part of that, or just getting or making sure he's not getting in the way of the development of Derrick Rose? Do you think Billy Donovan even has that? Because I have some serious questions, some serious doubts if he has that. That's my concern in this. The tank, the rebuild, I'm not worried about that because this Bulls team is a bad Bulls team, and AK can't really build a balanced team to save his life. So that's going to happen regardless. We're going to have a lottery pick each of the next at least 2 years, probably even in the next 3 years, regardless. But ask yourself, is 2 or 3 more years under Billy Donovan going to help Matas Buzelis' development or hurt it more? Or let me not even say hurt it, or get in the way of it more. Because I think it's a difference between actively hurting it and just being in the way of development. Those are, even though they both wind up in hurting a player's development, getting in the way of development, right? And that's something that stands out in all this to me. That's something that I have the big question about, is that can Billy Donovan get out? Now, maybe he can. Maybe we see over the next, now that he's going to go into an offseason with not having Zach LaVine, with not having DeMar DeRozan, hell, maybe not even having Nikola Vucevic to try to build his system around a veteran. Maybe we see something different from Billy Donovan in that case, to where he starts doing that, and maybe he creates more opportunity for Matas Buzelis, right? Maybe that's the case. But I look at a team that is supposed to be about your young players and development, that we see Kevin Huerter, the Ginger Valentine himself, getting minutes above Julian Phillips. And it's not like Kevin Huerter is being effective. If Julian Phillips, who also has had some problems with effectiveness and efficiency, would you not rather see that out of your young guy to see if he can work himself out of it, rather than a veteran who should be in his prime and is actually sliding in the last couple of years? Wouldn't you want to see that? Those are the things that raise questions for me in regards to Billy Donovan, and why the report last night bothered me, right? It wasn't a surprise at all. But it kind of bothered me because, again, it's this thing where if you don't hold any accountability within your franchise, how do you expect things to change? And I said this and I presented this question, and so far I haven't heard anything different. Where has there been a coach in professional basketball that the team's record has gotten worse 4 years in a row, that is then rewarded with complete and utter job security? Almost any other coach for any other franchise, no matter how inept or bad the franchise is, if they year after year, they got worse record-wise, you would hear, hey, maybe they're looking at something different. Maybe there's some internal pressure from the front office or from ownership. No, the Chicago Bulls see a team that's record is getting worse year after year, and they look at that and say, "No, you're good here. You're good. You're secure here. We got you. We're riding with you." That is the part that I am concerned about. I'm not surprised. But just because you're not surprised by something doesn't mean you still can't be concerned about it, because we finally do now have a young rook that seems like he wants it, right? That wants the responsibility, that wants to go out there and fight and compete, that wants to be great. Not to say that Ayo Dosunmu doesn't want to be great. I don't know. Julian and Dalen don't show enough emotion. I really don't know how they feel, right? But Matas from day one has talked about wanting to be on a winning team. Has even said, I would do whatever it takes if it means to win, right? And he's gotten better. As you throw more responsibility on the kid, he's gotten better. But it seems like Billy Donovan trickles it out. He breadcrumbs Matas Buzelis. I know breadcrumbing is a term used in relationships, but he breadcrumbs Matas Buzelis, meaning that, let me give you a little bit of this. Stay engaged, my boy. But then when the going gets tough, let me go ahead and sit you on this bench. Right? Let me go ahead and sit you on this bench. When it comes to opportunity to be a teacher moment, let me go ahead and sit you on this bench. Oh, you want to go at Isaiah Stewart? No, let me go ahead and sit you on this bench. Those are the things that raises concerns about this. I'm not surprised to hear that Billy Donovan's job is safe. Not one iota. It is what it is there. Not surprised. But I am disappointed because it once again shows that this front office is more attached to the loyalty of their coaches than more attached to the development of their players. And which one do you really think is going to get your franchise out of the gutter? Billy Donovan ain't that type of coach. So if you really want to get to a point of winning and getting this playoff revenue or whatever else it is, notice I'm talking about money, because that's what matters to this front office. Do you think that developing your young players has the better chance of doing that, or blind loyalty to a coach that has been mediocre coaching your team? That's the questions that I have. You guys can let me know how you feel on that down below. We got one voicemail to go today. This one actually came in on Monday, but I think it goes with the theme of what we have heard over the last 12 hours or so. This one's from Todd.
Hey, what's up, man? It's Todd. This one is a bit of an existential question after the idiotic press conference by Acme. Why are the Bulls the weirdest, most mental organization in sports? Though we may not have liked everything that Jerry Krause did during the dynasty, they made moves that made sense. Drafting Pippen and Grant, signing Rodman, Kerr, Harp, people like that. But at some point, when did this organization become so goddamn weird and stuck on stupid? Like Reinsdorf deciding 6 chips was enough and embracing mediocrity over everything as a profit motive, while being weirdly loyal to folks like John Paxson, who are still in the organization to this day somehow, which leads to another weird thing. Our front office, mainly this idiot Acme, who's currently, the biggest head case of them all, doing absolutely nothing that makes sense, thinking luck is an actual strategy. Hell, they can't even speak well, and he can't even speak well in front of the media, which is a main aspect of his damn job. Again, the Reinsdorfs, being head cases themselves, are extremely loyal to him, which continues while he continues to pour gas on this dumpster fire that is this organization, which leads to Billy, who is a head case himself, has this strange reliance on the vets when we obviously are in a rebuilding phase and need to develop our young players. That's just weird. And let's not even talk about his lack of ability to actually coach a team to do the most basic basketball one-on-one things like after timeout plays or getting them to move without the ball. And then it trickles down to our players. Mostly Pat, the head case of all head cases. I call him P. Won't. All the physical tools that any basketball player could wish for, but a mental block that's just too much for him to overcome, causing him to always be a 9-4-2 player, no matter if he's coming off the bench or starting. Like, what happened to us, man? And mostly, how do we reset this? Is it getting a player like Rose, who's just so good and overwhelming that he can just overwhelm the system and kind of reset it? Or what? Like, how do we get out of this stuck on stupid mode that we're in as an organization and the laughing stock of the league? I really want to know. So, help me out, bro, because that press conference was was too much for me. All right, we'll talk.
Listen, The fact that you called them head cases and the Bulls stuck on stupid, I think that's the best way to put this whole entire saga. The Bulls are stuck on stupid. The Bulls are a team that, I don't know what it is, but it's like they can't. No, I know what it is. AK wants to be the smartest man in the room without being the smartest man in the room. Jerry and Michael Reinsdorf, I don't know what the hell. Listen, I've said it before. I think as long as your check clears, they're good, right? But they want to be AK wants to be the smartest man in the room without actually putting in the work to be the smartest man in the room. Every other GM seems well more researched than Arturas Karnisovas. It just is. Like when you even there were some questions at the trade deadline. Why didn't the Blazers move off some of their pieces that everybody thought they were going to move? Why didn't the Brooklyn Nets go ahead and move Cam Johnson when everybody thought that they were going to be able to get at least a first-round pick back for Cam Johnson? So, there were some other GMs that made some questionable moves, but there's not really any Nico Harrison that he's a head case, right? But it still leads to the fact that we have still yet to truly pick a direction. And AK, every time he sees that glimmer of hope, right, of playing, he goes for it. Now, whether that's a mandate by the ownership group or himself, I don't give a shit. At this point, y'all all looking real similar. And so the lack of direction by this team is just the thing that continues to be concerning, and it continues to be frustrating. And you're right, they are head cases. Every aspect of this and layer of this franchise where we have head cases in charge. I don't know what to tell you, Todd, but we'll be here to cover it every day. Hopefully we can get through this as a family. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you ready for Canyon. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.